Hello everyone, this is DM Dungeon Mastery with a fresh new take on a video where I'm going to have my face for your enjoyment. Now, this is not a Creatures But Better episode, this is just something to hold you over as I'm still working on the goblins because there's a lot, and I've committed to making far too many. Now, this is going to be an original creature designed by me. This is actually already up on my Patreon, but I figured why not do a creature feature and break it down on a video for you all, because I know you like them. So let's do it. Now you might be saying, what is it, DM Dungeon Mastery? Get to the point already. Well, hold on, young Jimmy Dungeon Master. I'll get to that. The creature that I've chosen is a beholder. However, it's not this type of beholder. It's a beholder of my own creation. It was one that I've been brewing up for a couple months now, and I really just recently kind of sat down, tweaked the stat block, fixed it up, made it viable to play against. Now, beholders are very interesting. They come from the far realm, though they can be born in the material plane. A book that is going to really help you with creating beholders, if you really want to make your own, is Volo's Guide to Monsters. This book right here has a lot of really rich lore for the beholders. Now, my beholder is a celestial take on a beholder, because beholders are born in a very interesting way. In the older editions, they had a very grotesque and gruesome way to come into existence, which was really cool, but 5th edition actually does have, to its credit, a very alternative cool way that they're born. So if you flip to page 6 from Volo's Guide to Monsters, you will see how a beholder is created. With birth of a beholder, they can produce others of their own kind, but the process has nothing to do with biology and everything to do with psychology. When a beholder sleeps, its body goes briefly dormant, but its mind never stops working. The creature is fully aware, even though to an outside observer it might appear oblivious of its surroundings. Sometimes a beholder's dreams are dominated by images of itself or other beholders, which might or might not actually exist. On extremely rare occasions, when a beholder dreams of another beholder, the act creates a warp in reality from which a new, fully formed beholder springs forth, unbidden, seemingly having appeared out of thin air in a nearby space. This offspring might be a duplicate of the beholder that dreamed it into existence, or it could take the form of a different variety of beholders, such as a death kiss or a gazer. It might also be a truly unique creature, such as could be spawned only from the twisted imagination of a beholder, with a set of magical abilities unlike that of its parent. In most cases, the process yields one of 3 principal forms of the beholder: a solitary beholder, a hive, or a death tyrant. Now, before I continue any further with this video, I do have to keep the lights on, so I will plug my Patreon page, which you will find this stat block for free if you're a member on my Patreon. So if you were trying to download this stat block and use it in your own games, or tweak it with the website that I use to make my stat blocks, you'll find that over on my Patreon at DM Dungeon Mastery. The link will be in the description. Now, continuing on. The concept that I took out of that lore for the birth of the beholder was, if the beholder maybe dreamed about an angel or some sort of godlike divine being one day, and it created this mockery of an angel with the body of a beholder and these fleshy, grotesque wings of what would be an angel. However, it's not quite that. It's a foul mockery, and it uses these powers and abilities that an angel would have in a very devastating, evil, conniving way that a beholder would. Now, this is a perfect creature to use if you are a celestial warlock as your patron. I think it's a little weird when you choose just a god, like a normal god like Bahamut, as your patron, because warlocks enter a pact with something. Gods grant creatures divinity and divine powers, and they impose divine miracles upon them. So I think this creature is the perfect fit for your Celestial Warlock. So let's get into the stat block. Alright, so let's break down the stat block, shall we? With this Beholder, I did give it a much higher armor class. Its hit points are decent with 180. It's very slow. Beholder, that's very befitting of a Beholder. They're very, very slow, but they hover, so they never touch the ground. They're immune to being pulled to the ground. I'll briefly brush over the ability scores. You'll see this Beholder is not intelligence focused, it's wisdom focused, because I took the cleric route of making this Beholder. It does have a resistance to radiant damage, like the angels do, and I did give it damage resistances to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from magical attacks, and then if it's hit with a weapon that is not magical, it just takes no damage. So this creature is much stronger than a regular Beholder in the HP and defenses stance, but it's not necessarily stronger because you'll see as we go down to its cone of revealing light. This is not an anti-magic cone, so it doesn't prevent spellcasters from casting spells, activating magic items, that's the number one thing that makes fighting a Beholder difficult, right? You try to cast, these very powerful spells that you would have access to normally, but you cannot do that because you're in an anti-magic field. Now that does hurt the Beholder also because it can't fire its eye rays into that cone, but I went with a different stance. So this is Cone of Revealing Light. The Beholder's central eye emits a 150-foot cone of divine light, and each creature that starts in that cone, they have to make a Constitution save, and if they fail, they're blinded for 1 minute, but if they remain in that cone, they cannot repeat the saving throw until they leave. So if it blinds you, it's almost a permanent blind as long as the Beholder keeps its eye on you, which is very bad. If you really think about it, that is a pseudo way that prevents spellcasters from casting, because most spells state that at a point you can see, a target you can see, anything that has you can see in it cannot be used because you have no way to see. You're blind unless you have some form of blind sight. I did give it a weakness though. I have aversion to blindness. Now the original Beholder is not immune to the blinded condition. However, I do find it weird that if you cast a blindness spell on it, it blinds all of the eyes. I think it would be cool if the spellcaster had to make a decision when casting a blinding spell. So what this does is whenever you cast a blind that targets the Beholder, you have to target either the central eye or the eyestalks. You choose one or the other, and depending on what you choose, that's what it disables on the creature. Now, if you disable a Beholder's eyestalks, it really can't do anything to you. It has a bite attack, which does decent damage, but it's not going to really cause fear or anything into the hearts of your player characters. So you might want to stack a bunch of minions with this guy. Now, it does have keen sight. I don't know why Beholders don't have this normally. It's a little bit weird, to be honest with you. We do have divine awareness, magic resistance. These are things that angels have, so that's why I put these on the stat block. And then of course we have legendary resistances. You know what that does if you've been playing D&D for longer than, a couple weeks. Or, well, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't have higher level player characters who are fighting creatures with legendary resistance. So that concludes the defenses and stuff like that. Let's move into the action. Now, I had to bring up the page for the Beholder in the monster manual just to double check myself. So it's weird that Beholders don't have keen sight to begin with. But I said we were going to move into the actions, so let's do that. So moving into the actions, a lot of the eye rays you're going to see on this stat block are essentially just cleric spells that have been reworked into an eye ray. So we're going to start off with the bite first. Now, I labeled the mouth as an aberrant maw, as I do with most of my aberrations. It has two different things it can do with this. It can snap you or it can clench you. Snap is just, it does the piercing damage, and if you were large or smaller, you are crippled. I will put on screen what it does. if you're new here. I have the hiccups, excuse me. And then we have clench. So clench is like it's holding you in its mouth, like an alligator almost. It's a big, it's a large meatball with sharp teeth. So why can't it hold you in its mouth and then deal damage over time? The damage over time is really low. It's only a D6, and it's not something he wants to do to something like the barbarian who wants to get in close. Beholders want to really use their positioning to their advantage, especially because they're really slow. So once you get onto them, it's really hard for them to get away from you. We'll move into its special ability. This is Divine Inspiration. This is what I kind of gathered, maybe if this was a patron to somebody, or this is like an angel blessing creatures. So it does actually work sort of how an inspiration works for bards. It just gives you a d12 inspiration die to use on any saving throw, attack roll, or ability check for the next 24 hours. And that's not multiple times. It's once you use it, it burns the die, but it lasts for 24 hours. So it's like a blessing in a way. Now let's get into the big thing, the eye rays. So moving into the eye rays, this beholder has 12 eye rays. So that's 12 eye stalks it would actually have instead of 10, which is a little bit blasphemous, but then again, this is a blasphemous creature. It's a false version of an angel, essentially. So if there were ever to get artwork commissioned of this, it would have 12 eye stalks. However, I can't afford to get artwork commissioned of this currently, but in the future, I definitely shall. Now, the funny thing is, the more numbers that you add into something that is a random roll, where the highest number is the most damaging ability, the less deadly it actually gets, because if you had a D10 versus a D12, that's 2 extra numbers that you're adding into the mix for a chance to be rolled. So if you had a D8, for example, and imagine your beholder's death ray was on the 8 on the D8 versus the D10, you're going to have a couple extra numbers that are added into the mix, which is a less chance that you're going to roll that number. I know that I said that horribly. Sorry. Anyways, let's get through these eye rays one by one, shall we? The first one is Commandment Ray. This is the command spell, except there is no... the creature doesn't follow commands to harm itself. So if the beholder says, walk off the cliff, even though it has to be a one-word command, so you'd have to get creative, but if it says walk off the cliff or something of that nature, the creature has to listen. So it's actually pretty deadly. The next one is Tolling Ray. This is Toll the Dead turned into an eye ray. Essentially, it deals 4d8 necrotic damage, but if you're missing any hit points, it does 4d12, which is a decent amount. And we have Guiding Ray. This is Guiding Bolt turned into an eye ray. It does 6d6 radiant damage, and then the next attack roll made against that creature before the end of the beholder's next turn has advantage. Paralyzing Ray probably does what you would think it does. It paralyzes you. Radiant Ray does 8d8 radiant damage, so it's just a flat damage ray, and it actually does half damage if you succeed, which is rare on beholder eye rays. Most of them are if you succeed, nothing happens to you. That's the trade-off for the beholder, being able to cast spells at a constant rate. Once you succeed, you take no damage. Then we move into Silence Ray. This one's pretty nasty. If they fail this save, they cannot speak or cast spells with verbal components for 1 minute. Now these all last until somebody gets targeted with spell magic, so if you had this upon you, the cleric could, in theory, cast a spell magic to help you. But that's a whole spell slot he has to spend to help you. Otherwise, that's 1 minute of no spells with verbal components. So I'd say that's pretty deadly. And also you can't communicate, so if your players are actual role players, like they should be, they won't be able to shout commands and communicate with each other normally. It'll be quite funny watching them try to do that. The next one is Holy Fire Ray. This is 6d6 fire damage plus 6d6 radiant damage, and any attack roll against an affected creature has advantage if the attacker can see it, and then you repeat the save at the end of each of your turns to end that effect specifically. But It's pretty good. Now notice this creature is going to start doing increasingly more damage the further up we go, but there are potions in the game that reduce the amount of damage you take from stuff. So if you have a potion of radiant resistance, you're going to heavily cut this creature's damage down. The next ray we have is Etherealness Ray. Now this one's a pretty fun one. This is a scary one to get hit by from a player's perspective. So if you get hit with this eye ray and you fail a charisma save, which charisma is a dump stat for a lot of classes, but it shouldn't be because everybody loves charisma. Anyways, if you get hit with this one, you essentially get shifted to the ethereal plane. You are cast, you could see everything only in casts of shades of gray. You can't see anything more than 60 feet away, and you can only affect or be affected by creatures on the ethereal plane. And then creatures that are on the material plane cannot perceive or interact with you, etc., etc. You do repeat this save at the end of each of your turns to end on a success. But it's a charisma save, so if the barbarian gets hit with this, he's not going to be doing too good. This is a good one too, because if you were really mean as a dungeon master and you wanted to add like ghosts and stuff and say, oh, you get shifted to the ethereal plane and you're in the middle of a phase spider nest, pretty scary. Then we have Inflict/Cure Wounds Ray. This is a good one. This one lets the beholder heal itself, actually. So if the target fails the save, the beholder can deal 8d8 necrotic damage, or it can choose to restore 8d8 hit points to that target or itself instead. So it's just a pretty interesting thing that it can do. Then we have Banishing Ray. This one is pretty scary. This is a scary spell. It's hard to bring somebody back once this hits them and they fail the saving throw. So they get banished to their home plane, or if it's on its home plane, a harmless demi plane for 1 minute. Now, when I playtested this, I only got this off right at the end of the fight, but it was scary. The player had like an oh no reaction whenever it happened to her, so it was pretty funny. Now we have Harming Ray, and you can see we're up there. We're almost at number 12. This one's going to deal a lot of damage. This is the Harm spell, and it is turned into an eye ray. So it does 14d8 necrotic damage, and it reduces that creature's hit point maximum by the necrotic damage taken for 1 hour. The damage can't reduce the target's hit points below 1. Now, it can reduce them to 0 hit points from the damage, but it can't reduce the maximum HP to below 1. So that's what that means. So you can still knock a player character down with this. You just can't make their maximum hit points negative something. They would just be at 1 hit point. And then anything that hits them at that point is going to overkill them by, 2 damage would overkill them, which would be an instant kill, according to rules as written. Now the final one, this is a really cool eye ray. This is Divine Judgment Ray. The creature has to make a Constitution save. If they fail, they take 12d12 radiant damage. That is an average of 78 radiant damage. If this damage reduces that creature to 0 hit points, a divine scale appears to weigh the target's soul. It has to roll a d20. On a 10 or lower, the soul is annihilated, and it cannot be resurrected. Safe for a wish spell. If it rolls an 11 or higher, though, they actually get restored to half hit points. So it's a really cool, interesting little interaction where it's like you're getting judged by some sort of divine entity. Now, some of you might say, well, they're just going to get restored to half hit points. That's stupid. But I think it's a little fun mini game. I mean, they get 2 chances. They either get instantly annihilated and you can't resurrect them, or they redeem themselves and they come back to half HP. But that d20 roll gets no modifiers. It's essentially a death saving throw, except it's slightly out of the player character's favor. So that's pretty cool, right? I think it's pretty cool. Maybe you don't like it. I do. But legendary actions next. it doesn't make sense that beholders can't choose what eye ray that they use, especially if a beholder from the monster manual is said to carve its own lair out with its disintegration ray. Well, how does it do that? Does it just cast random rays at the wall for the next 3 to 4 hours until it gets disintegration ray? No, there has to be some sort of lore reason how they can cast their own eye ray of their choice. Now, what I did was, for its legendary actions, normal beholders have one legendary action, and that is it fires a random eye ray at a target of their choice. What I did was, that's the chaotic ray, so it's a random eye ray. Then we have Celestial Blessing, which lets it use Divine Inspiration, so it doesn't have to waste its whole action doing that, it just gets to do it with its legendary action. Or Divine Ray costs 2 actions, and it can use an eye ray of its choice from 1 to 8, and then it cannot use that eye ray again until the end of the beholder's next turn. So if some way, somehow, it would regain its legendary actions, you can't use the same eye ray before the start of its next turn. So that's just in case, you know, you can't cheese it, and you can't spam Divine Judgment Ray on somebody. Now, if you wanted to, you could add a 3 action cost legendary action where you could just say the beholder gets to use an eye ray of its choice. That pretty much solves the problem, right? That then makes sense. Okay, now the beholder can actually fire its own eye rays of its own volition once per round of combat, and then everything else is random. But that's pretty much it. That's gonna conclude what I had for this creature. This will be up on the Patreon page for all members, paid or not. So if you would like to support the channel, support me, go into the description, get the stat block for yourself, use it in your games. Let me know if it ran well for you. Let me know if it's too weak, too wonky, if there's some things I need to change, because, you know, homebrew stuff doesn't get play tested a lot, so I like to see if you guys play test my stuff. And also, if you're interested in becoming a paid member to support yours truly, I did just get done making a Tomb of Horrors map where I reworked I didn't rework the map, but I made it look a little bit more fancy and pretty, and I added labels for all the rooms, and I took the description straight out of the Tales from the Yawning Portal book, and I, you know, made the rooms, I tried to make them look as accurate to the description in the book as I could possibly do. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you liked it. Comments are more important. Even if you just comment a period. I thank you for your support. DM Dungeon Mastery, let me know if you want to see my face in more videos. I'll see you in the next one. I'm not saying goodnight. I'm just saying. Thank you.